Okay, so today we're going to be observing the part of the text where Jesus is carrying the cross. Yesterday we talked about the crown being placed on Jesus' head after being flogged, which is what we discussed the day before yesterday. But today we're going to focus on him carrying the cross that he would be nailed to. So before jumping into that, I want to give more insight on crucifixion and what it is. So first of all, according to learningreligions.com, it comes from the Latin word crucifixio or crucifixus, meaning fixed to a cross. It was considered a form of torture and execution used in the ancient world, and it involved binding a person to a wooden post or tree using ropes or nails. Jewish historian Josephus, who witnessed live crucifixions during Titus's siege on Jerusalem, called it the most wretched of deaths. There are several different forms of crucifixions, but we will focus on the one that Jesus experienced, which is called crux emissa or emissa. More detail regarding crucifixion is it was reserved especially for slaves. So this treatment was given to slaves and peasants and the lowest of criminals. Romans used this torturous method of execution to exert authority and control. Crucifixions were indeed common back then. They were designed not just to kill, but also to humiliate the one who was being hung on it. Here are some details of the kinds of crosses that they would use, according to crosswalk.com. Some were made in an X or a capital T or lowercase t shape, with the lowercase t shape being the most common. Height was very important. The person being hung was done so with their feet no more than 1 to 2 feet off the ground. This was so that wild beasts and scavenger dogs might feed on the corpse. Now, other things we can learn by using our imagination is that these crosses were tall. They were tall and long enough to hang the body of a fully grown man on. They were also heavy enough to hold the weight of the body of a full-grown man. And the wood that the cross was made of was actual real wood. Not fancy stuff we have today, but wood, like tree branch. And so it wasn't smooth like it is today. According to prophecies made in Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 22 and 23, it says, "And if a man has committed a crime, punishable by death, and he is put to death, and you hang him on a tree, his body shall not remain all night on the tree, but you shall bury him the same day, for a hanged man is cursed by God. You shall not defile your land that the Lord your God has given you for an inheritance." Also, according to Galatians chapter 3, verse 13, where it reads, "Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hanged on a tree." So these crosses symbolized one that was considered cursed by God, worthy of receiving severe punishment. Again, going back to the tree, we know that it's also big enough to need more than one man to lift. Now, crucifixions were common back then. They were designed not just to kill, but to humiliate. Because crucifixions were so common, not much was listed in the Bible describing it. In the book of Matthew chapter 27, verse 32, it reads, "As they went out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. They compelled this man to carry his cross." So it doesn't give much detail about him carrying the cross or what the cross was like. But from further research, we know that the cross that Jesus was hung on was rugged, not smooth, but rough. It was also heavy, requiring the help of another man who they grabbed from out of the crowd named Simon, just a random man, when they saw that he was struggling so badly to carry this cross. But a few details I want to hone in on are these. It was meant to bring shame and disgrace on the one who will be hung on it. When we talk about shame and disgrace, we're talking about causing one to feel humiliated or embarrassed. We're also saying that we're disgusted by this person and their actions. Keep that in mind. So after Jesus has been flogged and his flesh is now open and his body is sore and it's covered in blood, and after he has been yanked around, mocked and humiliated already by being stripped of his clothes and then put on some other clothes to be mocked, and then stripped of those clothes and his clothes put back on, and a crown pushed down on his head to pierce the skin on his face. After experiencing all that, in the same moments, they're forcing him to carry his own cross. Now, this isn't something that just Jesus did. Crucifixions were common, and it was also common for them to carry their own cross. However, we must remember that the difference between those crucifixions and the crucifixion of Jesus is that everyone else who was crucified, who was flogged and had to carry their own cross, went through that because of something they did, something that they deserved. It was punishment for their wrongdoing. But Jesus was flogged and mocked and humiliated and was forced to carry a cross, the cross that he would be hung on, and then hung on it. Not because of anything he did wrong, but because of what we did wrong. He was hung as a result of our wrongdoing. So again, just as we would see it wrong to beat a newborn baby because they can't do any wrong, we should also see this as wrong because Jesus had done no wrong. And he was and is equally innocent as a newborn baby. But again, he's suffering, he's bleeding, his body is trembling. It's all happening at the same time. He's not getting a break, he's not getting time to heal. He's not being shown any mercy. One form of pain after another. I mean, some bodies can't even handle this much pain. They would have gone into shock by now. And bleeding, broken, and open, and humiliated, and unrecognizable, I'm sure, at this point. We don't know how his face has become swollen or his body. We don't know. But what we do know is two things. And that's this. Number one, that his beating was brutal. But number two, that this brutal beating that he received and this unfair, evil treatment that he received was not a result of something that he did wrong. It was not because of him. It wasn't for him. Remember, he could have stopped it in an instant. But the only reason why he did not, because it was the only way for us to be forgiven. This was the only way for us to be forgiven. So he chose to go through with it. So he chose to endure all these steps and to suffer through all of these different forms of abuse. Not for him, not because of him, but for us. Because our sin got in the way, and this was the only way to remove it. And so he thought it a price worth paying for us, and so he did. Just try and picture it on a small scale as best as we can what this time was like for him. What his broken and weak and feeble and hurting body suffered through and endured, and how even after all of that, he was forced to carry a cross, which was not smooth, but was rough, rubbing up against his skin and his body that was just torn open. A cross that's big enough to lay a body on and heavy enough to hold the weight up a hill. Walking, if you walk long enough, you'll get tired. If you walk after getting beat, it hurts, it's difficult. But walking up a hill, an inclined piece of land with a tree on your back that's rubbing against your skin, that's exposed and hurting, I can't imagine. But I will make it my business to make an honest effort to take a moment to stop my busy, not so busy life, to take a look at what the one, the Holy One, the righteous one, the all-knowing one went through willingly, suffered willingly for me, for my wrongdoings and my shortcomings, for the mistakes that I made, just so that he could have a relationship with me. Just so that I could have moments like this where I could access him and where I could learn about God, where I could seek God and hear from him, where I could cry out to God in prayer and actually receive an answer. All of this for the doors to be opened again that were shut because of my sin, because of man's sin. Again, my mind, the mind can't fathom. But Father, I'm not here to understand. May we not be here to understand every single step or to explain every single detail, but to trust in what our Father has spoken and is speaking to us. Brothers and sisters, may we never forget, because this is one that we probably wouldn't be able to watch one of our family members go through. Yet he did it willingly. He was beaten brutally for us. But it doesn't end like this. There's more to the story. So please, please, stay tuned.